Joining us live now is National Senator Bridget McKenzie. Bridget McKenzie, thank you for your time. You've had quite a significant win with regional airports. What was the deal that the Nats struck with the government?
Well, you're right, Anneliese. It's been a fantastic outcome for regional aviation as a result of negotiations we had with the government to implement the national security screening arrangements. We're going to see costs disproportionately impacting regional airports and therefore operators and passengers heading out to the regions. We thought it was a much fairer outcome to see the costs for implementing the increased security arrangements to be more fairly shared across all passengers within Australia, because when we have high national security outcomes, it's everybody that benefits, not just the regional communities. And we know if you're out in Longreach or Alice Springs, Geraldton, getting between the capital city and your home or business is already an incredibly expensive exercise. And so disproportionately increasing those airfares in a COVID-19 environment, we just thought was not on. We are very, very happy that the government also saw to agree with us. Regional aviation is reeling in the face of the COVID-19 closures, and we want to make sure that as soon as we can travel around domestically, that we've got those domestic freight and passenger airport terminals up and going with as least cost input as possible. So we don't want costs to replace COVID in terms of impacting regional transport. It's just so essential if you're in those more remote areas of Australia, getting to see specialists in your capital cities. But also we want people in capital cities to head out, once we can, to the regions and really give that boost to our tourism industry.
How much was that cost imposed on those regional airports costed at, and who's actually going to bear that cost now?
Well, it's going to be spread right throughout the economy. So the model that was originally intended by the government to be implemented was that it is per passenger at each airport. And so if you're at certain airports, you don't have the throughput that you do at, say, Melbourne, Sydney or Brisbane, you were going to see cost imposts of upwards of $60 per passenger, whereas at, say, Sydney Airport, it was less than $1. If we spread the cost of implementing the national security system across all of our airports, regional and capital city, on passengers that are travelling right throughout the domestic system, then it's going to be a much lower cost per ticket. That's a sort of model that's already in place in places like New Zealand and the US. So we're looking forward to the process that Minister Dutton will be undertaking in consultation, obviously, with industry to develop a model that much more fairly distributes the cost rather than leaving it all with the individual regional airport and therefore passengers.
So does that mean if I were to, say, fly from Melbourne to Sydney, I'd be paying a higher impost now to subsidise regional airports?
Well, the final outcome of the model will be up to government, obviously. But what we're seeking, and the agreement we attained, was that rather than the disproportionate cost being put on regional airports and regional passengers and people flying from capital cities to the regions, that it'll be spread much more evenly right across the domestic passenger system. So, and the modelling that had been evidenced at the Rural and Regional Affairs and Transport Senate inquiry over recent weeks suggests that it will be a very minor increase as opposed to slugging regional passengers with upwards of $60 a ticket, much lower cost in the vicinity of under $5. But the final model, obviously, Anneliese, the final model obviously will be a matter for government, and we're looking forward to the consultation that they'll be undertaking with regional passengers and the like. What we want as a national party is a sustainable, vibrant regional aviation system We want more than 2 carriers going to as many regional centres as possible, because we know that competition drives down the prices of what's already expensive airfares for many of us. And as markets open up, having that regional aviation is not just important for movement of passengers, but also for our freight task to get our clean green product out of the regions to the capital cities and then to the ports around the world.
If we look at the coronavirus recovery plan, there is going to be an easing of restrictions, but we know that the hardest hit parts of the country will be those regional areas. What could the government be doing to make sure regional Australians aren't left behind as we look to the future?
Well, I think we've got the plan now that we maps out really our COVID-safe Australia. And I think the regions are really well positioned to take opportunities in a post-COVID environment if we can get those infrastructure settings right. We need to make, the world is going to need clean green food. Our mining industry is underpinning our national economy. So a lot of a private industry-led recovery for Australia will be being driven out of the regions. I've been really buoyed by discussions I've been having with food manufacturers in my home state of Victoria to see that the government is actually focusing on increasing our advanced manufacturing piece and looking at how do we stay more secure, make sure our capacity as a country is more secure, that we're not relying on overseas countries for what are now essential items. Because if it isn't another pandemic, it could be issues of slowing down freight. So we need to become build that national capacity, do things more here at home. And I'm really excited to see what that will bring, not just in food production, but right across the board. We saw what happened with PPE, having to rely on other nations, but that's actually spun out into some fantastic outcomes. We've got a manufacturing business just out of Shepparton in my home state, right smack bang in the middle of the Goulburn Valley in regional Victoria, who's really been able to upskill, innovate, train their workforce and do something else with their manufacturing capacity. So there are going to be opportunities coming out of this, but it is an absolutely devastating time. You saw the job figures yesterday. We've got upwards of 600.
No, we do know that those are becoming quite an issue. Bridget McKenzie, we are just about to run out of time, and I did want to ask you about the community sports grants issues. We saw the Australian National Audit Office reveal that the PM did want those projects run past his office. The day before the election, you sent a list of those projects to the Prime Minister's office. Did the PMO ask that one project be swapped out for another?
Well, I've already dealt with that in a statement I made post-estimates, Anneliese. The fact is this was a fantastic program, highly successful and very much in the national interest. The program from the start made sure the Minister had the approval to finally sign off on all projects, which I did, and I take full responsibility. I had a lot of representations from not just the Prime Minister's office, but from MPs right across Parliament, and I took those into account. But at the end of the day, the exercise of my ministerial discretion saw these projects more fairly distributed right across the country, more projects into regional Australia, and oddly enough, more projects to Labor electorates. So I'm very proud of what we did with that program. It was very clear from the start the Minister had the discretion to do that. I've made a full submission to the parliamentary inquiry. I encourage your viewers who might be interested in it to either visit my website or the Senate Committee website and have a read. And I really don't have much more to add beyond that.
Is the Audit Office wrong though then? Did the PM ask, or the PMO I should say, ask for one of those projects to be swapped out, or is that incorrect?
Well, as I've already dealt with, Anneliese, in the statement post-estimates, I signed off on round 3 projects on the 4th of April. There was a change made. I'm advised that my office made that change, and I am the final decision maker as Minister. Irrespective of what the Prime Minister may have asked me, Anthony Albanese may have asked me, my Senate colleagues may have asked me, the fact of the matter is I'm the final decision maker, and I'm proud that the decisions I made saw these grants more fairly distributed across the country. That's a great outcome for sport in communities.
It is a team effort, though. Do you feel like you are unfairly copping the brunt of this?
Oh, not at all. I take full responsibility, Anneliese. It was a great privilege to serve as the Sports Minister. You know, I resigned because ministerial integrity is actually important to me. And when it became clear through the Gaetjens investigation that I had breached ministerial standards by failing to declare in a timely manner 2 memberships, I resigned, as was appropriate. But at the end of the day, this was a great program. It was fully endorsed by Cabinet to run it through Sport Australia. And anyone that's actually interested in reading the ANO report will actually see that it was Sport Australia's administration of the program that the Auditor-General actually focuses on in his recommendations. So I'm really buoyed by the fact that Sport Australia has taken that seriously and is making appropriate adjustments.
National Senator Bridget McKenzie, thank you for your time.
Anytime.